Greetings, Robert Locke. Thanks for taking the time to watch these myth videos. We're on myth number 71. Myths are kind of things I used to believe were true, and after 20, 30 years in the business, found them not to be true. Maybe I can save you a little heartburn by kind of exposing some of these and some of the things I've learned over the 35 years. This one goes like this. A manager should mandate non-smoking in their lease, right? Now, I'm going to really step on some toes today. I know that because there's a whole group of people in the world of property management who really do believe that having a non-smoking clause in the lease is really a good thing. And it serves the owner and it serves the manager and it holds the tenant accountable, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to kind of step on your toes a little bit. Sorry about that. Here's kind of how this video started out. I was at a national trainers meeting up in Virginia with NARPM trainers, and one of the NARPM members, we were just talking, one of the NARPM members said this. He said, "We are totally a non-smoking shop." And what he was saying is this: all of our leases now have a non-smoking clause. And he was kind of crowing about it. You know, he said, finally we got there. And he was kind of expecting everybody to applaud him a little bit. And I think there were some people around there kind of like raising an eyebrow and saying, huh, why are you doing that? So let's kind of talk through what are the challenges and what should you do about it. Now, there's some obvious challenges that we have in letting tenants live in the house and smoke. So let's look at them and kind of put our cards on the table. Number one, tenants leave behind odors. Smoking odors are kind of a tough thing to deal with. Secondly, if you ask an owner, owners love the idea, oh yeah, let's not let a tenant smoke in the house, and we can kind of get away with it. But what most people don't realize is there's some liability that we're putting up on ourselves when we have a non-smoking clause in the lease. So let's talk that through a little bit. Never put language in your lease that you can't monitor or enforce. In other words, I've seen tenant or managers all over the country put all kinds of things in their lease that they have no system in place to monitor, track it, or enforce it, and really don't intend to. What they don't realize is that they're putting liability on themselves that they really hadn't calculated in the discussion of whether or not they should have a non-smoking clause in their lease, okay? The owner has a reasonable expectation that you have a way to track and enforce whatever you put in your lease. So if you put in a lease, no pets over 10 pounds, then you've got to have a way to either carry around a set of scales and weigh that dog every 4 to 6 months and enforce it. Or if you say non-smoking and you don't really have a way to quantify it and enforce it, then you've got a liability because the owner expects you to enforce the terms of the lease. In fact, job one, you ask any owner, they would say job one is enforcing the terms of the lease. Enforcement includes detection, measuring it, quantifying it, proving it, calling the tenant to task and default the lease and give them an opportunity to cure it, terminate the lease if they don't, and evict the tenant over it. I'm not sure many managers who have a non-smoking clause ever thought in terms of how do I quantify it, how do I prove it, can I stand before a judge and actually evict somebody over the fact that, you know, there's some smoke smell in the house. I don't know many managers that have ever tried to do that before. It's kind of silly when you think about it. So the question is, why put it in the lease? If you have no way to really track it, enforce it, and measure it, and hold the tenant accountable, you got some real liability to the owner here because he expects you to enforce the terms of the lease. So what is the liability, okay? If you don't have a system in place to monitor and enforce the terms you put in your lease, you're exposing yourself to liability to the owner. You can say, we'll do regular visits. You can do a sniff test. I've never found a smoke-o-meter. I mean, we tried this in our early days and tried to figure out, you know, did they stand outside the sliding glass door in 50-degree weather and smoke and it blew in the house? Was the teenager there the last night when the parents were gone and they left the cigarettes? There's no way to kind of prove this or quantify it. So you get in front of a judge, you know, and the judge is going to kind of say, how do you know that tenants smoked in the house? And so there's a real question here, and the question is, do we have a reliable way to measure and quantify the smoke smell enough to make a case in front of the judge for enforcing it? Or are we just putting it in the lease in hopes that the tenant will comply and to kind of make the owner happy? And I think that's probably the case. It just kind of sounds good to the owner. Haven't really thought through how much you can quantify it and whether or not you can really enforce it. So the downside then is this. We adding monitoring and administration. When we add non-smoking clause to the lease, we are adding an administrative responsibility to somehow figure out how, through property visits and smokometers and sniff tests, that we can kind of quantify whether or not they've been smoking in the house, or whether or not they smoke a lot at work and went to a beer party and brought it home in their clothing, okay? People smell smoke in many different ways. There are people that can smell it a mile away, and there are other people who smoke. They can walk into an office complex and they can't smell anybody's smoke, except everybody can smell their smoke. We add administration. You add liability yourself by implying enforcement. So what's the takeaway? Owners don't know what belongs in the lease. If you say to an owner, we don't have a non-smoking clause in the lease, they kind of say, oh, good, I like that. We signed up 2,500 owners. We never tried to put non-smoking clause in a lease. We never used that as a selling point. You're just using it as a selling point. You need to be really careful with that, because there's some serious liability that goes along with it. Number two, punish the 1% of the offenders trying to monitor 100%. If you got 1,000 doors and 500 of them have smoking or non-smoking, but they're smoking, you're going to monitor that? How in the world are you going to go around and do sniff tests, or we use a smokometer and figure out who's smoking in the house? I don't know how to do that, and I'm pretty good at this. Deal with the 1 out of 100 owners who ask for non-smoking. We fixed this, and I'm going to show you how we did it in a minute. So there is it to protect yourself. That's the bottom line, isn't it? I'm telling you, this is a CYA issue. You need to protect yourself. There's no revenue in it. So it's all CYA. So here's what we encourage you to do. By the way, the second half of this myth video, because it's too long, is how to solve the solution. So sign up for our myth video series. Go to trainingpropertymanagers.com/myths, or just go to our product page, find this Dismantling the Myths, sign up for the series. It doesn't cost anything, and we'll put in Myth 71 Part 2, show you how to fix it. Thanks for listening.